Hey guys, so I'm just popping up really quickly to have a chat with you about supplies. Please don't rush out and buy tons of expensive supplies for this little retreat. Get to know, buy cheap supplies if you want to buy new ones, and get to know what you like to work with, because if you buy the top of the range of everything, there will be some things that you prefer over others, and we've all got them, expensive supplies that stay stashed away in the cupboard that we rarely use because we didn't really get on with them, or perhaps they were really too expensive and you're kind of afraid to use them because you feel like you've got to do something really good with them. So don't put yourself under that kind of a pressure. You could complete this whole week just using scraps of cardboard, and this piece, I think this was from like a cat food box, and I will be doing one of the exercises using this purposely just to show you that it really can be done. And I haven't even primed it with gesso. I was going to say, if you're going to buy anything, then buy some white gesso primer, because this stuff is brilliant. It's absolutely your friend. Anything that goes wrong, you can cover up with gesso and start over. Any sort of paper or card, pretty much. Whatever it is, you can coat it with gesso and then you can work on it and add pretty much anything else on top. It really is an amazing primer. Alternatively, if you don't want to spend out money, or you would rather use up what you've got in the house, household emulsion paint is fantastic. That's what I've used to prime this piece of cardboard, and I've gone horizontally across this, and what I'm going to do is not quite dry yet, it's almost dry, I just did this a few minutes ago, and I'm going to also, I will then do vertical brush strokes as well, give it a second coat. Obviously pastel colours are better, so if you don't want to splash out on a ton of paints, a few of these match pots would be a really good place to start. You will also need a pencil or a pen. A basic kind of school HB pencil is completely fine. I do also love to use, this is a Lyra graphite stick. This is graphite, a sketching pencil. It's still only HB, so it's just a medium weight. But it's lovely to sketch with, rather than wood encased graphite, which is in a basic pencil. That's a 6B, so it's got a very soft lead to it. But you can do everything with a pencil. And actually quite like writing words and things with pencil. I find that quite a pleasing experience over different surfaces, and it will write on pretty much anything, which is great. Also, willow charcoal is super useful if you have it, but don't rush out and buy it. And chalk, the cheaper the better, because the more expensive chalks have a lot of binder in them, so they don't work as easily. So actually cheap chalk is great. I'm just going to put that to one side. Papers, mixed media paper is fantastic because it's really heavyweight. So if you have that, use that. It's great to work on. It'll take all amount of punishment. I would still personally prime it with gesso. This is an old painting that I think I was doing with some watercolour. I'm not a watercolour artist, so it's probably not a very good example, but this is it's almost as thick as card. It's a really lovely smooth surface. It will take an awful lot of punishment. So if you're going to buy a pad of paper specifically for mixed media, this stuff is great. If you're like me and you have to have any slightest excuse for buying a new sketchbook, then go ahead, treat yourself. I don't need much telling on that. This is a Daler Rowney. Again, it's A4 size, which is my favourite size. It's like a medium weight paper. So I would definitely still prime this with gesso before I added a lot of wet media or collage or anything to it, just to give it a bit more substance and to stop anything going through to the other side. But if you've got a cheaper version, you can get things in the works, or budget art stores. Children's paper tends to be lighter weight. You will definitely need to prime it before you start. The other thing that might be useful to have ready is a stack of papers for collage. Anything, magazines. I've got some newspaper scraps here because some of the script and some of the colours will be great to use for collage. I'm definitely going to do an exercise using some collage. Different sizes of words. Me against the world. I just quite liked that quote, so that might appear somewhere in one of the collages that I do. A bit of scrapbooking paper. Dressmaking, old dressmaking pattern. This tissue paper is fantastic for adding texture into your collage. A bit more scrapbook paper there. Also some musical score. You can usually pick up cheap sheet music in like charity stores and places like that. So if you're looking to bulk out your stash of papers for collage, that's a great place to start. But first and foremost, old magazines. We've all got or can lay hands on old magazines and newspapers, so that's a really great thing to just gather a few of those up. You won't need loads. If you have them, then stamps, rubber stamps or foam stamps of all types. Beg, borrow or steal them if you don't have them. Mine are well used, well loved. I'm not very good about cleaning them. If you want to keep them to use with inks and you want them to have a really fine quality print after we've done this, then please clean them better than I do. You need to scrub that out as soon as you've used it with acrylic paint. Otherwise it will get into some of the cracks and it will affect the clarity of the image if you keep on letting them get dirty like I have. But I don't really mind because I kind of like the imperfection of well-worn stamps and things. Also oil pastels. This is just a few that I keep to hand. I tend to use just a few, sort of a limited palette when I'm using a page or when I'm creating a painting. So these can be any quality. Again, they're not expensive to buy. If you do decide that you want to splash out on something like this, you can get a basic set of oil pastels, about 24 in a pack for £2 or £3 usually. You can go up the scale. These are Sennelier Oil Pastels. They're amazing, they're creamy, they're rich, they're incredibly dense and beautiful to use. But, you know, play around with the cheaper versions first. It won't affect the using of them particularly while you're learning and while you're getting to know a medium. And certainly using them in mixed media, if you're just using them for mark making, it actually doesn't matter that they are wonderful and rich and creamy. That's just something that I really like because they happen to be a media I particularly enjoy. Obvious basic stuff. An old brush for applying gesso and applying layers or base layers of your primers. That's really dirty, as is my water, but you get the idea. You will need that to hand. And glue, yeah, that's a bit of a sticky problem, shall we say? That's a terrible pun. Glue is, I really like the Mod Podge matte for journaling work. It gives a really matte finish, anything will go over it and it sticks really, really well. So if I was going to recommend one, it would be that, but use what you have. Just be aware that a lot of glues, particularly PVA, have a shiny surface when they're dry. So that means that when you put other things over them, it's going to affect how things write or how paints will attach to your layers. So you either need to be very careful about how you apply them, or you need to take that into consideration. You may need to use a clear gesso to prime if you wanted to paint over a very shiny surface. Masking tape, if you have it, really useful, but not necessary. An old credit card is really handy when you're gluing down your collage papers. You can use that to just smooth them out, get rid of any air bubbles, but sometimes air bubbles and creases in your paper give you a texture that's really fun to work with. Other things work with are a variety of mark making tools. One of my favourite things is, well, this one's all gluey and dirty, but I love kebab skewers for mark making, just dipping them in the paint and using them to make a variety of marks. Sponges, if you have any packaging coming in the next week or two, great again for mark making. And also an old drinking straw. Again, you can blow through that and push the paint around, or you can actually use it just as a mark making tool to spread the paint. So they're super, super, super useful. Also, if you have them, palette knives. These are just cheap ones, plastic ones, but again, they're great for moving the paint around and for just by using different tools to move your paint and to make your marks. It can really free you up and it gives you another dimension. It will affect the finished result. So yeah, super useful. Acrylic paints, a variety of, if you have them, super useful if you want to do similar projects to what I'm producing. But again, like I say, use what you have. If you've just got half a dozen household paints, if you've got a few pencils and wax crayons, use that. Don't rush out and buy a ton of stuff. You will need some brushes. A variety of these are quite well used. I love these with the slant on. I've got one there which is a little bit fluffy. This one is a little bit crisper because it's new. I just recently bought a set of these. They're just a nylon brush. It's a Royal Clear Choice, whatever that is. It was a super budget. I think I got about 6 or 7 brushes for a couple of pounds. So you can certainly get a variety of very usable brushes that you don't have to be too precious about because they didn't cost you a fortune to work with. Have a cloth to hand, and any other media that you have, bring it, because things will substitute. You can use watercolor crayons, watercolor paints, pencils, have some scissors to hand. They might be useful. And I like to tear edges, but that kind of covers it really. That should be enough to get you started. I would say definitely if you don't have a sketchbook, then this is the time to be just preparing some pieces of paper and card that you can just have ready, primed, so that you don't have to spend ages priming something before you start a project. You can have it ready, and then if you want to kind of play along while I'm live and do the project as we're producing them, then you'll have stuff ready. Oh, the other thing that is super useful as well is something to spray water from. A garden, you know, the sprays that you use on plants are great, but you want a fine one. Some of them are quite heavy. You don't want something that actually drenches the whole piece. You just want something with a really fine spray. This was from a hair product, so if you're a curly haired girl, you will have plenty of these available. I always keep them because they're super useful. Also, acrylic inks are fantastic. The Amsterdam inks are amazing quality and an amazing range of colours. It's one of my favourite colours there, so I'll probably be using some of that. And this is a liquid. This was super cheap. Again, I think this was from the works. This is a liquid acrylic in black, which also will double up as black ink. Very dense, very permanent, and it really wasn't a lot of money. So there's a few ideas of things that you might want to bring along or invest in. Oh, and the other thing that I will just quickly talk to you about is you need a palette of some sort, which I forgot to put on the list. I apologise for that. Hopefully it's kind of obvious, but I use plastic tubs for my palette. This was probably filthy here. It needs to come out. So this is baking paper, baking parchment. I don't know what else you'd call it, like greaseproof paper, I think sometimes we call it. And I've got some kitchen paper, the kitchen tissue paper underneath, a couple of pieces of that. And what I actually do, I get some clean water, is I just moisten that slowly. And then I will put, in a minute, I'll get the roll of somewhere that I can even reach to show you. The greaseproof paper. I usually use white, but for some reason I've got this kind of the natural colour stuff here. It's completely fine because I'm not, like I said in the notes, we're not recreating the Mona Lisa this week, so I'm not too worried about the fact that my colours won't be terribly accurate on the palette. But I'll just greaseproof side up. That bit of damp underneath will keep these wet, and you can then, if you've got lots of acrylics out on your palette, you can seal that up and you have a kind of a DIY version of a wet palette. Much loved, but super useful. As a temporary thing, keep a lookout. Food containers, if you buy takeaway sandwiches and cakes, these are super useful. So you can have, if you've only got, if you don't have something or you want something that you can just seal up quickly, these are super useful. You can seal your paints and they will keep for a couple of days in one of these without too much trouble at all. Alternatively, ceramics or glass, a white or plain plate or saucer or glass dish, super useful for putting your paints out in. So improvise, have a look around and just gather your stuff together. Hopefully you'll be able to dedicate somewhere to your workspace as well. That can be super, super useful too. But if you can't, then keep it all together in a box or something just for the week so that you can get the most out of it, because it can be really it can really sort of crush your creative edge by having to worry about tidying up and being on a time scale and that. So try to dedicate an area to getting the most out of creating this week. Any questions about supplies, any extra suggestions, anything I've missed or I've mentioned that you think, what on earth is she on about, please do shoot me a message, fire up a question, and I will come back to you. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that's helpful. Go gather up your scraps of cardboard and paper and start gathering some materials as we get ready. Just keep them stashed away and we will make use of them later on. Thanks for watching, guys. I will speak to you really soon. Bye.